buenos días a todos. Está claro que el mundo en que vivimos es cada vez más digital. Y así saludamos con eso a todos los miembros de este auditorio, nuestros panelistas. Pero no hay dudas de que esa tendencia hacia lo digital se ha venido acentuando, sobre todo con la pandemia. Y uno supondría que es un mundo cada vez más inteligente, lo cual no significa que sea un mundo sin grandes desafíos, sin problemas o sin conflictos. Diría que lo contrario a veces. Ahora, sí resulta obvio que los avances tecnológicos están impulsando una verdadera revolución, como lo ha explicado el presidente, como lo explicó Marco, Jem, que impacta casi todos los sectores económicos, algunos con profundas implicaciones que requieren de mucha atención por parte de los empresarios, de los políticos, de los académicos. Y el sector financiero no escapa a esa realidad. De hecho, por su tamaño y por su incidencia, enorme incidencia en las economías modernas, yo diría que se encuentra al frente en el proceso de transformación, de cambio o de disrupción que estamos siendo testigos. Ahora bien, históricamente, los procesos de rápido cambio, producidos por invenciones, innovaciones, han implicado también desplazamientos, incluyendo la desaparición de empresas o de industrias líderes en su momento, pero también surgimiento de nuevas creaciones, cambios en el mercado laboral, en las destrezas, los skills requeridos y desde luego en las políticas públicas y en el marco legal en los diferentes países. Y solamente tenemos que pensar en algunos casos como el del automóvil, lo que ocurrió con la carreta y todos los coches de caballo, el tractor en la agricultura, las vacunas en la medicina, la energía renovable, la energía nuclear, las tarjetas de crédito, para solo mencionar algunas de esas cosas que tomamos por dado, tomamos por sentado, pero que en su momento gestaron profundos cambios en todas partes donde se han impuesto. Como todo proceso, el movimiento disruptivo que se viene gestando en el sector financiero no está exento de contradicciones, a veces posiciones encontradas, y ya lo hemos visto en el día de hoy. Y como veremos en el transcurso del foro, de los paneles, sujeto a una gran diversidad de perspectivas, algunas moderadas y otras que le llamamos outliers. El panel que me toca moderar cuenta con expositores de primera línea, todos con una vasta experiencia en el tema que trataremos, la disrupción del dinero, disrupción en el sector financiero en su sentido más amplio. Ustedes tendrán la oportunidad de escuchar las opiniones sobre temas tan importantes como el rol de la tecnología de blockchain, acabamos de hablar de eso, el papel de las criptomonedas, el impacto de Web3, los niveles de incertidumbre, seguridad e inseguridad, así como la relación de ese mundo emergente con la economía real. También la visión sobre las monedas digitales de los bancos centrales, CBDC, la posición de los bancos comerciales e instituciones formales, así como el marco regulatorio que se está conformando en diversas jurisdicciones. A cada uno de los panelistas le hemos pedido que nos ofrezcan sus opiniones honestas, abiertas, acerca de cómo ven tanto los aspectos positivos como los riesgos y dificultades y que nos expongan su visión sobre la posición de las instituciones bancarias, las autoridades, pero también, como hemos visto acá, también tenemos presente algunos emprendedores del mundo DeFi, del mundo FinTech. A modo que podamos formarnos una mejor idea de qué realmente está pasando en la actualidad qué es lo que se avecina en el futuro cercano, qué se nos viene arriba o no, y cuáles son las oportunidades. Pero también, como decíamos, los retos y desafíos que se nos presentan. Al final del panel tendremos unos minutos también para que ustedes puedan hacer algunos comentarios o algunas preguntas sobre el mismo. Así que yo le pido que recibamos con un fuerte aplauso a nuestro panelista. Tenemos virtualmente a Scott Nations, presidente de Nation Indexes, reconocido como uno de los principales desarrolladores independientes y líder mundial en indicadores de opciones. Es autor del libro Historia de los Estados Unidos en 5 crisis. Tenemos acá a Alexander Rigaud. Alex, CEO y fundador de STEP, experto en codificación de blockchain, emprendedor, innovador y profesor universitario en la Universidad de Sorbonne en París. Habla fluidamente 5 idiomas. Bill Spada. Bill, CEO de Dev Team 6, es un orador también muy reconocido, un líder innovador cuya misión es desarrollar tecnologías avanzadas que simplifique la experiencia del usuario en criptomonedas. Brian Papelk, lo tenemos también a Brian a través de la presencia virtual. Es CEO de BIT, Banking Innovation Through Technology. Es una empresa que brinda soluciones de moneda digital, bancos centrales, en distintos ecosistemas alrededor del mundo. Brian, a propósito, tiene experiencia en nuestra región, habiendo asesorado al Banco Central del Caribe Oriental para lograr emitir y operar el primer instrumento digital de un banco central del mundo, el Dcash, estando esta moneda en curso en 8 de esos países del Caribe Oriental. Y tenemos también a Víctor Buzón, VP de Marketing de la empresa Taurus, una prestigiosa plataforma de gestión de activos digitales con una gran experiencia en el área de mercadeo y empresas como Procter & Gamble. Let me now turn to English so I can better communicate with my panelists. Let's do first a round in which you will have a few minutes to present your initial statements. You're free to talk. And then, based on the time we have left, we have discussed this before, we can interact more freely and react and respond to comments to your co-presenters. You can do that, okay? And also maybe questions that come from the audience. So let me start with our guys that are present virtually. Scott Nations, would you like to say a few words for us? And again, welcome my panelists.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me. And I think this will be a wonderful panel. We all love to talk about and think about disruption, particularly in the financial sector. Briefly, let me expand on my biography a little bit. I run Nations Indexes. We are the largest independent developer of option volatility indexes, and we are the ones behind the new NASDAQ 100 Volatility Index. Futures and options are trading at the Chicago Mercantile Exchange and on NASDAQ. But I love the topic because I've actually written a book about the history of the United States is told through stock market crashes, told through the lens of stock market crashes. And each of those historical crashes was fostered by some sort of new, novel financial contraption, I call them, which injected liquidity, which injected instability and leverage into a financial system at the worst possible time. So I think that the conversation is important because disruption through new products often takes us places we really don't want to go. I jotted down some of the factors that I think will be the biggest disruptors over the next 10 years. And briefly, and these are more or less in order, I think artificial intelligence can do wonderful things It can help banks make loans, insurance companies write insurance more efficiently. But to the degree that we don't really understand all of the inputs to those, to the algorithm, I think that we have to pay attention to not just the disruption, which can be a good thing, but also some of the chaos. As an example, the flash crash in the United States stock market on May 6, 2010 was largely a function of algorithmic trading without any human interaction. And at one point that day, the Dow Jones Industrial Average was down almost 10% on the day. Second thing, we've heard about this over the last hour or two of the conference, and that is digital money, which can be a wonderful disruption to the degree that you can hold money outside a traditional bank. That can be a wonderful thing in that it removes some of the frictions of movement. And the third thing I'd like to talk about is big data, which can be a wonderful disruption if it allows financial institutions and consumers to make better decisions. So if we actually have access to big data, we're able to make better decisions based on what has happened in the past, rather than simply guessing as to what we think might have worked in the past, then I think big data will be a wonderful, wonderful disruption. So all of these offer real opportunities, but we do have to be careful about unintended consequences because, again, disruption has sometimes led to chaos that we just didn't anticipate. So looking forward to hearing other panelists' opinions.
Thank you so much, Scott. Brian, I'm going to continue with you because I don't want to have any interruptions with technology here. You know how it is with Murphy's Law. Brian, where are you now, by the way?
I'm in Salt Lake City, Utah.
Salt Lake City, Utah. That's one of my favorite places, by the way. It has a lot of dark skies, so I try to go there for that. So Brian, if you can take it over and say a few words for us.
Sure, thank you very much, and thank you for having me. I certainly wish I was there in person, needless to say. But listen, my name is Brian Papelk. I'm the CEO of a company called BIT that was founded out of Barbados in around the 2014 timeframe. We have been, since 2016, in the central bank digital currency world. And I've really enjoyed the comments of all of the speakers to date because everyone has hit on some really primary discussion points that we are seeing in market today. BIT is one of the first movers with central bank digital currency around the world. Just a quick note about what we offer. We're an infrastructure service provider. And so we are working with central banks around the world where we have currently 4 deployments. One that I'm sure everyone is familiar with there with the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, as you mentioned in the introduction with Dcash. A very early deployment and a lot of lessons learned, as you can imagine, being a very first mover in a small monetary union, but a monetary union nonetheless. We're also in Nigeria, so a rather large deployment, 220 million people in Nigeria. We're also in Belize and have been working with a large national bank in the Ukraine. And as you all might imagine, there are unique opportunities and possibilities with the idea of a digital currency in a country that is torn with conflict and with the hope of rebuild down the road. But these are all things that we see as opportunities within the digital currency inevitability. I think that we are like-minded with most of the speakers to date that disruption is an interesting word. I always think of the word transformation. The gentleman that offered a question to Mr. Reynolds earlier used the word trust. And trust is really the basis for what this disruption or transformation must look like for it to take root globally and for us, in our opinion, to really expand and take advantage of what we see as large advantages through advancements in blockchain and trust and what digital currency can offer in programmability. But there are some really heavy thoughts and challenges around the idea of surveillance and privacy, KYC, AML, security, and frankly, scalability of blockchain and its ability to provide speed when it comes to transactions, the type of transactions we're all used to. And so I think with that, I am anxious to hear more from the other panelists and look forward to the conversation. So thank you again for having me.
Yeah, thank you for that. Thank you, Brian. I would ask you to stand by for a few minutes, see if there's any reactions to your words, but also perhaps some of the questions that we'll have for you. We're now going to refer to the panel here, physically present. We can start with you, Rigon. Alex?
Thank you very much for the great introduction. O muchas gracias, podríamos decir. So my name is Alexandre Rigaud, French-Australian, born in Hong Kong and bred all around the world. CEO and co-founder of STEP. Our mission at STEP is to positively engage humanity through life, thanks to blockchain and insurtech solutions. I'm also the co-founder of a crypto trading fund that we started in 2015, as well as an environmentally friendly recycling blockchain business. A few words that were quite interesting since the very beginning of this conversation, of the whole discussion that we've had all together, is store of value that the gentleman said at the back of the room there, as well as bartering at the very beginning of the conference. And all that relates to trust. I love telling the story of my great-grandfather in the French Alps. He used to be a farmer. And he used to go to the post office with an egg and exchange an egg for a post stamp. And that's not that long ago. Bartering, trust, and store of value, all related to community. That's what blockchain is all about. A globalized, local way of trading and exchanging value and storing value in something else than traditional monetary systems. Today, thanks to blockchain and solutions such as cryptocurrency that rely on the underlying blockchain infrastructure, enable the creation of solutions such as the one that we work on in my ventures, of circular economy, redistribution ecosystems, where bartering becomes a reality. Bartering of everyday realities, like recycling, like health, wellness, fitness. Transforming digital concepts into real-world utilities, so that your everyday well-being can actually be transformed into social security systems, dynamic cashbacks, rewards, but also enabling people to actually finance their well-being and their social security system with data, storing data, for example. So these are some of the subjects that are passionating my life currently, and that I'm actually talking about in my book that should be released in a few weeks from now. And that's also part of the things that I teach at INSEC and Sorbonne University as well. So I'm more than happy to talk about all of this with you and how together, today, more than ever, we can make the world better thanks to blockchain.
You want me to go? My name is Bill Spada, Dev Team 6 CEO, also co-founder of Dev Team 6 with my partner out there in the audience, Eric Anderson. Pleased to be here, very much an honor. I appreciate the invite to come out here and speak to all of you, so that is definitely an honor of mine, so thank you. First and foremost, the topic that is really big for us. We come from the decentralized world. My firm is a blockchain firm. We built on blockchain. A lot of what we do is smart contracts. We've launched cryptocurrencies. We've pushed them live into centralized exchanges. We've partnered on the centralized side, but mainly lived on the decentralized side. But you know, the message that I bring coming from that side of the coin or that side of the fence is we're more than happy to work with the governments. We want to build mass adoption and bring the true technology of blockchain to the forefront and utilize it for its best uses and see the utility and application actually play out in the real world. So, you know, governments are very focused now on centralized regulations and a lot of the exchanges, and there is a lot of reason to start there. There's, you know, issues with lending, there's issues with borrowing, there's issues with staking and yields and earnings and all that type of thing, but the decentralized world makes up probably 80% of the actual transactions on the blockchain. And I don't think that people realize how deep it is. And the big win for the governments and for the agencies out there is to be in the collaboration efforts with the builders of the platforms on the decentralized side and put those policies in place, put those pieces in place now, work in collaboration or even work just in some sort of consultation work, but there needs to be a more of a focus on the platforms themselves. You know, the lending platforms and the actual pieces that are powering this decentralized world that is happening out there. It's easy to worry about the centralized side because that's where your regulations and your scope goes. But if the governments were involved in the platform building on the decentralized side, we could literally build mass adoption together and build a hybrid world that is going to accept it because the safety measures will be in place. We'll see the policies actually play out and make sure that there's compliance and all the things that need to be done. And to the person's point, I think it was Reynolds that was up here earlier, I can't recall, you know, talking about centralized exchanges and our gentleman back there talking about the decentralized side and the banks and all that. You know, the biggest things for the government is they don't realize that they can actually play on the decentralized side. And he asked, how are you going to build trust? Because the biggest concern with banks is you can freeze my assets. You know, and that's why people go towards the decentralized side is they don't want their assets to be freezable. They don't want these things to be accessible to somebody and not within their own control. And there is ways through the smart contracts and see, it all lies in the platforms. Everything is built and powered by these platforms. And if the government was to get involved, they can still relinquish that control and keep it truly decentralized. However, all the building blocks that were built into that actual platform were all put in the scope, the policies, it matches all the compliance that they want to see in these platforms. And then once they know that it's where it needs to be and it's the standard that is acceptable and is safe and secure for consumers and everybody that's engaging in it, they can relinquish it and they can make it a decentralized platform. And what's the best part about it for the government is all the fee income that they're going to earn from that decentralized platform will far supersede, because it's worldwide exposure versus local and their local populations in their countries. But I could go on for days about this topic, sorry.
Thank you. You're being very generous. Thank you. You were very generous with the time. So we're on time here. We're making up some. But please, Victor, go ahead.
Okay, so my name is Victor Busson. I'm CMO, so Chief Marketing Officer at Taurus and Head of Partnership. There is a bit of echo. Should be better now. Taurus, what is it? So what do we do? You can think of it as a digital asset infrastructure. So what does it mean? It's like a one-stop shop for banks. So we will help banks and financial institutions to manage digital assets. And when we talk about digital assets, it's very important to define them in 3 different pillars. Number 1 pillar is cryptocurrencies, so cryptomoneda. Here, think Bitcoin, Ethereum, and as a bank or as a financial institutions, I will be looking into securing or custodying, meaning that putting them in a wallet, those cryptocurrencies, this Bitcoin, this Ethereum. The second big opportunity that we see is related to tokenized assets. What are tokenized assets? So it relates to the tokenization, and tokenization is a big word, but what is it simply? It's just the digitalization. It's just about digitalizing where we believe real existing world asset. So usually you have 2 big markets, like the public markets and the private markets. So public are listed companies that are already working on, let's say, electronic infrastructure. But when it comes to the private markets, how does it work? Everything is still paper-based. Okay? So the biggest opportunity, it's all about tokenizing, meaning digitizing those private assets. And when I talk about private assets, could be equity, could be debt, could be real estate, could be creation of a structured product, could be art. So it's a gigantic opportunity. And here, what matters the most is all about when you digitize the asset, you will issue basically a token associated to this asset. So it's like an asset-backed token. And what matters from a regulation point of view here, it's very simple. The regulator, depending on the market, but we need to recognize the distributed ledger technology as a valid ledger, as a valid ledger for this asset. And as soon as this is done, basically, you open up the market, or you open up basically the possibility to digitize all the private markets. So cryptocurrencies, tokenized assets, and the third pillar is, we talked about it quite extensively, which is stablecoin and CBDCs, so central bank digital currencies. So basically making sure that a bank can mint, meaning create token, burn token, in a secure way. Okay. And usually when I say mint token, it's like basically creating maybe more digital dollar, more digital euro, more digital peso. And here, basically, it's all about, usually the main thing to keep in mind, it's all about paying attention to the stabilization mechanisms behind it. So what is a stabilization mechanism for a stablecoin? Is it 1 peso backed by 1 peso? Is it $1 backed by $1? And here, what we've seen recently, with all the challenge and the collapse of stablecoin, is the issue with the stabilization mechanisms. Basically, it was not 1 Terra Luna dollar that was backed properly by an equivalent. So every bucket has its own challenges, and every bucket will have its own regulation. But what's important to keep in mind, it's not only about cryptocurrencies. It goes, blockchain and distributed ledger technology goes way beyond. And what we do, and really our job at Taurus, is to help those systemic bank, private bank, investment bank, crypto bank, even in Switzerland, where we are based, to really take the most of every pillar and ensuring that every move and every strategy is fully compliant with the local regulation, because regulation is key. And Switzerland, we have the luck to be based in Switzerland. and we are very much kind of in advance, probably 2 years, I would say 24 to 36 months in advance compared to probably some other countries. So we are convinced that there is a lot of share and reapply that can be done between the different players and collaboration even between countries.
Thank you. Let me, we still have a few minutes, and I want to jump in with a few questions, okay? They'll be quick, but the word trust has been mentioned so many times, and I remember that was the name of the first book ever that I presented to you, Mr. President, Trust by Francis Fukuyama. And it was so interesting at the time, back in the 90s. But certainly, trust is such an important element of everything that's going on. But with everything that's going on, especially in the recent developments in the crypto world, showing a downwards trend, including some significant crashes, like Terra Luna, Celsius recently, do you see them, and I first start with Alex, but please, anyone can jump in. You see them as temporary losses and loss of trust, or are there more permanent trends that will be with us in the future?
That's a great question. Thank you. Thank you for that question. So I think if we step back and we look at the whole global market situation of cryptocurrency as a whole, there is a Chinese concept, a philosophical concept called Wei Ji. Wei Ji is, in times of crisis, there's always opportunities. And yes, the volatility of the markets, yes, great losses for projects such as Terra Luna, which I won't be commenting on that at all. Several opportunities. First are a great cleansing of all the Ponzi schemes that were seen, unfortunately, on the blockchain and cryptocurrencies. Secondly, also, is opportunities for real utilities to appear on the blockchain. CBDCs are some of them, but governments also have many more opportunities around cryptocurrency and tokenization, apart from traditional, let's say, central bank tokens. A couple of weeks back, I was speaking at an event organized by the Ministry of Health in Saudi Arabia, talking with the minister himself about the concept of health currencies, tokenized health currencies, led by a government, enabling the empowering of a circular economy based around well-being, health, fitness, nutrition, enabling social security systems to be tokenized and empowering the population to act and to actually be part of change at a level that enables the bottom of the pyramid to actually be part of an ecosystem. So I think these types of technologies and real-world use cases are there for the long term, and I wouldn't see what we're seeing now on a micro scale as a market crash, as an issue for the long term, because whether it is new approaches to tokenize ecosystems, government-led or not, or simply the use of blockchain as a technology per se, not looking at blockchain directly linked up to cryptocurrency, because blockchain is a technology before everything. And blockchain can change the world in such beautiful ways without necessarily using cryptocurrency per se. So these are what is there to stay for the long term, I think, and those real world utilities and things people and governments can act upon are there to stay.
Okay. Well, thank you. Alex, Bill, and this goes for you too, Scott and Brian. If you can jump in, but here's a question that I'd like to ask for the audience. Have you had any personal or institutional failures that you can say that you want to share with the audience and you learned some lessons from those failures that you think that we would all benefit from?
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, one of the things being on the building side of blockchain is, you know, smart contracts as we know it over the years have evolved, and they continue to develop various different techniques and features, functions, etc. Earlier this year, we actually were part of an exchange that was hacked. We were hacked for $3 million or just around $3 million or so, and you know, learning as you go. The resources in blockchain right now is what's being engaged in it by the people around that you go out there and try to, you know, work within and develop within blockchain. So as more resources come available, and you know, there's better ways to build stronger and build faster, it'll be easier. But you know, with crypto, it's what have you done for me lately, and how fast can you get it done? So for us, it was a great learning curve. Great example. You know, you brought up his question a minute ago on Luna, and you know, that whole situation and the trust in the markets and seeing the crash, the crypto crash, and you know, to me, it's funny to hear how people perceive or the optics behind it, right? And you know, a lot of what I think is happening, and people aren't really seeing it, is the same market makers that are messing with the stock market are now getting involved in the cryptocurrency world. That's where Terra Luna's issue started, and exchange of assets and some other things that took place. So it's not that the blockchain was broken or Terra Luna was broken. It was a vulnerability that they got themselves involved in. But these market makers, the same BlackRocks and all these other names that are out there in the actual stock market, are doing the same thing they do in the stock market that they did with the crypto world. It's just highly sensitive in the crypto world because it was one of the first major times that shortage was made, and it literally threw the whole thing off. So, you know, there's a lot of personal experience I've seen in blockchain, but you know, it's all out there. It's just the evolution as we go through these level ups, I'd say, as we're going to learn, we're going to grow, we're going to evolve, and it's going to take time. And
it certainly is a learning curve to everything. They're signaling that we only have a few 5 minutes left before we go to the audience for a question or two. So Brian and Scott, what advice would you provide to countries, developing countries like the Dominican Republic? We have a full spectrum of the economic and political society here in the audience. And given your experience, what advice, key advice that they should take home with them would you give now?
Ryan, do you mind if I go first?
Please.
Thanks. I think it's a wonderful question, and I think it goes back to the original question, and that is trust. And I think that while the blockchain is wonderful technology as it's been expressed in cryptocurrencies, there is no trust, and we shouldn't expect there to be trust with the headlines that we've seen, so many people being hacked, some people being taken advantage of. And I saw a news item today, famously, several years ago, somebody had been mining Bitcoin in the UK. They threw out their hard drive, and I saw the news today, that they had raised essentially a venture fund, got investors to dig through the landfill where the hard drive had been discarded, and it had 150 million pounds in Bitcoin on. And so I don't think we're going to have trust until those issues are satisfied. I think about what happened in the United States in the 1930s. People came to not trust their banks, and with good reason, until there was government intervention. Government intervention seems to be absolutely contrary to the idea of cryptocurrencies. So back to your question, what should a country like the Dominican Republic do? I think digitizing an actual currency makes tremendous sense to the degree that it reduces frictions, it allows people to operate without being forced to access banks. They can actually store on the blockchain, they can store currency, real currency, not cryptocurrency, real currency on the blockchain, and they can transact on the blockchain without going through a bank or some other financial intermediary. That is where I believe the Dominican Republic should focus, because that brings real value to the citizens.
Thank you. Brian?
Yeah, and thank you, Scott. I did not pay Scott for that endorsement of the concept of maybe a CBDC for the Dominican Republic, but certainly that's where BIT focuses. And so to pivot towards a CBDC and what advice I would give, I think that what we have learned over the course of the last 2 years in market, working directly with central banks for over 5 years, is that establishing trust in the market and a go-to-market strategy is a multi-pronged, complex thing to undertake. And oftentimes, developing economies, emerging economies, are unlikely to fully appreciate the change management challenge that it takes for a central bank to take on a new infrastructure like a central bank digital currency. In a very pragmatic way, financial institutions, government institutions, private agencies, merchants, brand, it's all critical to hit typical mandates of financial inclusion, of reduction of cost, reduction of cash, which we know throughout the Caribbean is a highway of transaction, but is to take on very seriously and to think ahead of what infrastructure by human capital it requires to have a successful deployment that can bring about this level of change. It's a real issue, and it's one that we seek to advise our potential clients on when the consideration is there. But it requires all of this from a global sense to really help to establish trust in the public sector for people to adopt and actually use this. It doesn't do us any good to provide technology if in fact the man on the street, the woman on the street, doesn't have access and can't use it.
Okay, thank you. Unfortunately, they're telling me we ran out of time. We have time for maybe one question from the audience.
Gracias. Hemos hablado bastante en la mañana sobre regulación, desregulación, sobre las funciones de los bancos centrales. Y quisiera preguntarle a uno de los panelistas, ¿realmente favorece a alguien la no regulación? Y si de los factores que se ha dicho para no regular, existe un tema impositivo. Pero fundamentalmente, saber si a alguien se beneficia por no regular el mercado de criptomonedas.
Si podría decir algo en ese tema, no sé si beneficia a alguien en particular la non-regulación. Podemos ver ahora algunos estados que están empezando a regular criptomonedas, por ejemplo Dubái, de donde vengo. Llegué de Dubái algunos días atrás y es el primer gobierno que está regulando criptomoneda. En realidad, hoy en día puede ser no hay regulaciones en criptomonedas, pero está llegando. Y si pensamos a quién beneficia esa non-regulación, diría a personas que hacen crypto trading que benefician de la volatilidad de la criptomoneda, porque pueden ellos hacer simplemente comprar y vender y hacer ventas rápido. Pero aparte de eso, no veo ventaja o desventaja en non-regulación, porque la regulación está llegando. Y vamos a ver regulación globalmente llegar en criptomoneda en los próximos años, creo.
Okay, and just to finish it up, is it going to be a better world with crypto and the decentralized
100%.
organizations growing, or is it going to be a more volatile, more uncertain, more unpredictable world? And you have 30 seconds for that, Alex.
Oh, it's going to take time, and it's going to
Bill.
be a little bumpy, but It's going to be able to build monetary infrastructures in countries that don't even have them today. I think over the next 5 to 10 years, it's the best way to really unify humanity.
Good. Victor?
Cryptocurrency will remain volatile. It's by default its nature. Even if it's maturing, it's boom and burst. Tokenized assets, basically, here you digitize real assets, the real economy. And basically here, the trend is slower, a bit more organic, but we are at the basis of the parabola. So basically here, let's say that the view is crypto boom burst, it continues and so on, but these tokenized assets, we really are at the beginning of this gigantic wave where I believe in the next 10 years, every company will have, let's say, its operation run digitally, including its shares, equity management, can do fundraising with its own employees, with its own partners. So it's really unlocking a bunch of new tools and new weapons and making sure that all the new fabric and all the economy really move to this digital era thanks to blockchain. So organic growth of our tokenized assets.
In better world? Yes. 30 seconds? Yes. Few words. Madagascar. 400,000 people on which we are empowering a solution and enabling them to finally have access to basic healthcare in a country where healthcare doesn't exist. All that thanks to cryptocurrency, thanks to blockchain. Bangladesh, India, Pakistan, all those emerging nations can now empower their population, empower them to take action for their lives. And that is an opportunity for every emerging market in the world.
Brian and Scott, anything? 30 seconds?
I'll take it really quick. I would echo all of my fellow panelists' sentiments. It will be a better world. It is an inevitability. We should expect that we will learn some lessons along the way, but the ability to empower emerging nations cannot be overstated. This is a real opportunity to unlock economies that for decades have been to some degree suppressed, and to provide and build on our theme today, trust within these countries for inclusion and price of the basic movement of money and unlocking the economies. All good.
Quickly, yes. Yes, it will be a better world because it will become a more efficient world. But I think that we also have to recognize that, like every new technology, we get very, very enthusiastic, overly enthusiastic in the early days. And I think that the next 10 years, next 20 years potentially, that will be the story for blockchain. We will see a few major uses for it, and we'll see a lot that end up not deserving the hope. But I look forward to a much more efficient world.
Ok, bueno, con eso yo creo que hemos concluido este primer panel. Creo que todos nos llevamos una idea de que hay muchos temas complicados, pero ciertamente el tema de la confianza que se va generando en este mundo descentralizado que se está conformando frente a nosotros. Recientemente estuve en otro evento similar a este, donde se hablaba de la celebración, the celebration of the decentralized world that's emerging. Yo creo que de algún modo nosotros acá estamos comenzando a experimentar lo que puede ser de manera entusiasta ese conocimiento que se requiere para tomar decisiones. Porque al final de todo esto, cada uno de nosotros tendrá que tomar algunas decisiones. No solamente en cuanto, digamos, a las criptomonedas, todo el tema de la tecnología que subyace debajo de eso. Nosotros, por ejemplo, Y con eso termino. En el Parque Cibernético estamos impulsando, bueno, pues algunas iniciativas, tales como el metaverso dominicano, estamos hablando de bienes raíces, estamos hablando del turista virtual, estamos hablando de, por ejemplo, utilizar el blockchain para cadenas de suministro en productos agrícolas. Y ahí estamos trabajando de cerca con el Ministerio de Agricultura, estamos trabajando con sector privado, café, cacao, tabaco, cosas muy vinculadas a la economía dominicana, y lo estamos haciendo y yo creo que vamos avanzando, pero son pasos que no llegan a un final inmediato en corto plazo, sino que tenemos también que ver cómo todo esto se va desarrollando y abarcar cada vez más el universo de la República Dominicana, de la región y obviamente del mundo. Con eso yo creo que nuestro panelista merece un reconocimiento de parte de todos ustedes por su buen trabajo.